Good evening, guys, and welcome to the Dodgy Idealist. Today we have a retake on the Constitution from last week because of really bad audio problems that we did not foresee. My guest is Dee Martin. She is a law student at the University of the Western Cape. Is that correct?
That is correct.
This time I got it.
You did.
Welcome, Dee.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Dodgy.
It's a pleasure, even though it's the second time trying to get this
I
correct.
I don't mind. I really enjoy talking to you, so it's completely fine with me.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you very much. Uh, so, we were discussing last week this whole idea of the Bill of Rights within the Constitution and how it allows fair discrimination.
Yes, last week we did focus a lot on Section 9, which is the right to equality, and how none of that makes sense, and it is just, racism posing as social justice. We did speak a lot about that, yeah.
Yes. So, do you mind maybe introducing us to this section?
Okay, sure. Well, this section to many does not seem to be that big of a problem because it starts off very quite rational and sane, which is section 1, which says everyone is equal before the law and has the right to equal protection and benefit of the law, and that is something that we all want. That is what is called the rule of law, and it is a very important part of any legal system to make sure that no one is above the law, right? We don't want the law giving anyone special treatment, even though it does. It genuinely and truly does. But okay, moving on from that. After section 1, when we get into section 2 up to section 5, everything just absolutely goes to shit. And there we start talking about different groups of persons needing to protect and advance certain groups of persons, needing to distinguish between fair and unfair discrimination, and all of that, things that allows for AA and BE, just things that we don't like and that we have enough sense to know that it is nonsense. It is the stuff of bigots. We shouldn't want this in our supreme law, but unfortunately it is, and it plays a big role in why our country is currently going to shit, honestly.
And that is very, very, very nicely put, actually, because as as you probably also know, Beth, myself, and Moo Raider had a
Mhm.
discussion on this where we said we don't really like the Bill of Rights because it makes space for all this discrimination or fair discrimination, as they would put it.
Yeah.
And we would rather focus on fairness as opposed to equality because egalitarianism leads to this sort of social justice needs within a constitution, Bill of Rights, or even in these sort of equality clauses within the Bill of Rights. Would you agree with that, or would you?
Oh, absolutely. I don't agree that equality should be something to strive towards in society. I honestly don't. I like the idea of having a hierarchy because I feel like that adds a more, how could I say, it it increases the need to compete,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a very good thing. Fairness is what's important in terms of the law because we want the law to treat everyone fairly, and you know equally in terms of this section. That is the only reason why this section should exist, is to make sure that everyone is treated equally under the law. But then we go into this different off ramp on how the state needs to treat people differently according to which group they fall into, according to how kind our history has been to them. And that is a problem because we don't even have like a benchmark of where like, okay, you have reached this level and now you don't qualify for the same things that section 9 might give to other people with your skin color, as we see happening with BEE, um where like there's no, how can I say, there's no expiry date. And I mean, right now, if you look at the state of our country, it makes sense why there wouldn't be one, because there's still a lot of black people still being left in the same state as they were prior to um prior prior to 1994, right? But that's because our government has failed at pretty much everything, if we're being honest.
Mm.
And it's sad that, like, not even a clause like this, Section 9, could help our people. It's sad that, like, even with all of this power given to the state, we still could not, like, move forward after more than 2 decades.
Yes.
Breaks my heart.
Yeah. I think also what a lot of people confuse with regards to the state is instead of protecting our rights, they expect the state to protect them from life. And as you know, our mutual friend, Siv, mentioned something very interesting to me. I know this is now after the fact that we had our discussion and I had a
Mm-hmm.
discussion with him, but I think it's important maybe to also mention this. Um, he said, for example, and I tend to agree with him, that you can't have a Bill of Rights if you are looking for redress within the law.
Yes, yes. Oh,
So,
no, obviously.
yes, specifically because there is no end date to redress, right? And
Exactly.
also, I find it very, very strange that, for example, there needs to be this sort of classification of people on the basis of the color of their skin. Um, in this week, there was an author, a journalist. Let me see if I can find that. But she said basically that the DA, in regards to racial laws, broad-based black economic empowerment, affirmative action, and so on, the
Yeah.
whole idea of supposedly non-racialism, that is a form of a denial. But
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
yes, but if I'm really honest about it, she also said that race will always matter in South Africa. So it's like a perpetual apartheid, if you understand what I
Yeah.
mean.
Yes, it
That to
is.
me is speaks volumes about the mental state in which we find ourselves in South Africa. And we really need to have more outreach to people to try and convince them that redress is not going to happen in the form that they want it to happen, that it will come through a free and fair market, specifically fair market, right? Um, what are your thoughts based on that so far?
Well, that's a very difficult like thing to think about, because I don't think we would ever be able to change people's minds on this, because people want change and they want it now.
Mm.
I mean, like, if you look at how in this past week, with the whole hair fiasco at the EFF and whatever, and how people are now today thanking the EFF, um that just shows that there's a large group of people in our country um who would do anything to see change, no matter how that change is, like, how can I say, no matter how that change is achieved, even if it is by violent means, they would do anything for it, even if it means being racist, And I think that, to say that, um, wanting to be non-racial, saying that that is a form of not not admitting that race will always be a thing in this country. I think that to say that is honestly racist, not to anyone in particular, but more racist in the sense of, you're trying to be racist forever. You are trying to keep our country in this racist context, out of which our history comes from.
Yes.
You are trying to keep us chained up in apartheid forever. How I thought the whole idea of Nelson Mandela and the ANC was for us to move away from those kinds of policies and those kinds of laws, because that was apartheid. Apartheid was literally just race-based laws. How can we be calling for that now? I don't get it.
Yes, definitely. And what's well, we can talk about the ANC and its real motives as well, because we also have to remember the ANC was a liberation movement, and from what I can see from
Mm-hmm.
liberation movements in the past, it was never really to liberate, in quotation marks, uh, the populace that they aim to liberate. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there are tons of good documentaries out there that I think maybe we should also try and recommend. I'll see if I can't find them and I'll drop them in the description below. But
Mm-hmm.
I would urge people to read up on the history of the ANC, of the National Party, and the whole fiasco that happened there, and
Absolutely.
how they approached the struggle, because it's very very fascinating and horrific at the same time. They're not the angels that they claim to be. Let me put it
All
that way.
all that the history books make them out to be as well. And when I say history books, I mean like the history textbooks,
Yes.
what we learned in school about them, you
Oh,
know.
yes. Because they saw people as a means to an end and as weapons of war, basically, and they utilized the people very, very well in that regard.
Absolutely.
Um,
Especially children.
oh, yes, definitely. Look, nothing, well, there's the saying, all is fair in love and war. So keep that in mind.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so, yeah, this whole sort of idea of the eternal apartheid and this whole fair discrimination. You mentioned a case of the SAPS versus Barnard. How did this whole Section 9 of the Bill of Rights play into that?
Well, I'm so happy you actually read the case because I didn't even read the case. Okay, I had a lecturer explain to me. So well done. You are less lazy than an actual law student. That's brilliant. Um, but yeah. So in the case of Barnard, like I said, it was a policewoman who applied for a promotion, and she was told that sorry, you can't get it because you're white.
Hmm.
And she took her case to court, and it went all the way up to the apex court. And they agreed with the decision to not promote her solely based on the fact that white people were over oh my goodness, over represented in this field already, and they used section 9 to justify that ruling, which I mean makes the case for why we should get rid of section 9, in my opinion. That that ruling was just absolutely shocking. That should not happen in South Africa. And but of course it will, because they mask it under this social justice and redress and all that other like types of bullshit. But we know that it's racism. Denying someone a position solely based on the color of their skin. That is literal racism.
It's insane. That's what it is.
It
I don't know
is.
if you saw, for example, that what's his name, Jimmy fella, for example, today again. I find it quite
Oh, Jimmy.
yeah, I find it quite interesting that he would call himself a centrist, but he has these sometimes, how can I put it? Controversial would be a very pleasant way of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
Controversial takes on issues, right? So somewhere in because I just quickly scrolled through it and I just saw people respond to him, but basically it went something like this. There is a water problem or a water shortage problem in some location because the ANC, the government of the people, did not supply water to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're supposed to do. So no water services. And all of a sudden, Jimmy then turns this into a racial issue. And this is something that we see both the EFF
Oh,
does
I hate that.
and Jimmy does as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's no wonder, and I look at, for example, yourself, myself, um, and all of our other mutual friends, which I would peg as relatively centrist, that those
Mm-hmm.
that peg themselves as centrist like Jimmy and maybe no, well, not yes, maybe Bianca also at some
She's a
degree.
lefty.
Oh, but she'll tell you no, she's a centrist. Uh,
I've never heard her say that she's a centrist though. She always just says, "I'm not far left.
yeah,
I'm
meaning
somewhere like, on the reasonable side of the left end of the spectrum." But yo,
which is
girl.
just a nice way of saying I'm not there yet, but I see myself as somehow in the middle, leaning to the left.
Right. Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's just a nice way of saying that. And it's no wonder that they would see us, like you and myself, for example, and all our other mutual friends, as radical right wing Kabbalists, right?
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if you're part of that club yet, but I hope you are.
You know I am. Come on, don't even say.
No, I just had to pull your leg there for a bit. But yeah, coming back to section 9 on equality, right? Especially 9.5, I think the next section, section 10 and 11, also play a big role in that. Because then you start looking at human dignity, which is very subjective.
Extremely. I have a massive problem with human dignity. In my opinion, it shouldn't even be in there. Um, because as I said, this week as well, again with the hair advert, I don't think that um I don't think that we should try to legislate people's feelings, and I feel like that's what the right to dignity largely does. Also because it's just so vague. I mean, if you open a what do you call it? When you open a oh my goodness, a constitutional law textbook,
Mm-hmm.
right? You will find a chapter in there on the right to human dignity, but it's literally 2 pages long. Um, because it's so vague. No one really knows how to define it, and the courts almost always use it um, with um, with Section 9. Hardly ever is I can't think of a single case, maybe one right now, but hardly ever is human dignity used on its own. It's always it is usually used with something else because it is just the most vague thing. The other value people use as another word for human dignity is what do you call it, is what's what's the word? Ubuntu.
Hmm. Yes.
That's what the courts also use a lot. But it's that's a value. It's not even in the constitution, but judges are allowed to make value based rulings, and they mostly do that when it comes to the right to human dignity, which is also just a mooch to fuck up.
Well, I've got a problem with it's probably going to sound strange, but I've got a problem with judges making value judgments in court
Obviously,
cases
yeah.
because that is not like you pointed out, that is something that is not written down in law. So how am I
Yes.
supposed to interpret his judgment value or value judgment? um, I don't agree with it.
Exactly.
Furthermore, like this, like you've pointed out, like this hair fiasco with clicks and such.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, some people's feelings were hurt because of the whole hair issue, and I can see that, I can understand that. But again, which is more which is more mortifying? The person, you know, in an old home, incapable of helping themselves, and those workers that are supposed to help themselves strike, and those old people lying basically in their own feces and filth for weeks on weeks, or this hair fiasco.
Right.
Which would be more dignified, or which would be more mortifying in the public eye, for example?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's very very difficult to say that this is more mortifying than that uh, that thing over there. And I think people tend to throw things out of proportion, if that is correctly stated.
Oh,
Espe-
absolutely.
because you know I you know me, and some of the other people there as well. We say well, vote with your money, right? If you don't
Mm-hmm.
agree with a company, if you don't agree with a product, don't buy it, right? And try
Mm-hmm.
and convince others to not buy it as well. But to go out and basically destroy a store, because that's what the EFF had done, they destroyed stores through vandalism.
Exactly.
They prohibited people's freedom of movement from entering the shops and exiting the shops in a safe manner. There's this old lady, our Oma, that we all love and adore.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
Yes,
Oh my gosh.
and
Hero.
also the right to property, because Julius Malema, there's a video of him locking a Clicks store. That
Mm-hmm.
clearly goes against the property rights of that individual or of that store owner.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, listen. I, I, I'm definitely one of the people who can understand the hurt behind that advert.
Hmm.
Like, don't even worry. My hair is all. Oh, okay, I'm not supposed to say this, but my hair is dry and damaged, but I'm trying to fix it. So, um, I completely understand why people were outraged, and in my opinion, in my honest, like, truthful opinion, that advert was racist.
Oh, yes, definitely.
But,
Look,
oh my goodness. But what the EFF did was unacceptable.
hmm,
They something needs to be done to them because you can't. You simply cannot incite violence like that.
no,
Stores were freaking petrol bombed over a hair advert, right? And then to say that, like, listen, the other thing is Clicks did apologize. People were fired. They already dropped the brand, so I mean, just get over it, you know? Um, and to then invoke Section 10 for this, and to say that your right to human dignity has been impaired, that doesn't sit well with me, right? Because like, you don't get to take your feelings to the Concord, or to the not the Concord, actually, in this case, the SAHRC, and go and make your case when, like I said, it's just your feelings that got hurt. You just felt a little bit insecure and they made it worse. And I can understand why people of color already feel insecure about their hair. I completely get it. But I don't believe that Clicks needs to be punished like this for that advert. I really do not. I think they've made enough. Not made enough. They did enough to make up for what they did, and I think that we should leave it at that. You know, if we do this, where we go out and petrol bomb stores to teach businesses a lesson, how are we going to move forward? All because you think this is racist, and now this old Danny is also accused of being a racist, which is just, no, she was being harassed and she defended herself. That's what you do with a gun, you know? That's what you're supposed to do with your right to self-defense. If you have a gun and you feel that your life, your safety is being threatened, you have the right to do what you need to do to let people know that you're armed and you can do something about what is being done to you right now. But people are saying, no, she was carrying a gun. um this was all done for the purpose of, like, trying to bully black people, trying to make black people feel unsafe. Y'all were making her feel unsafe. What was she supposed to do? She had a gun. She showed it. Good for her. Oh, I love her so much. I love her so much. She is just a hero to me right now.
I think for the majority of sane South Africans, she is a hero. Let's quickly pedal back to the South African Human Rights Commission and their stance with the EFF, right, in regards to this
Yeah.
whole fiasco. Because people did start to report them for incitement of violence and so on. And the South
Yeah.
African Human Rights Commission basically came out and said that they support the EFF because sometimes it is necessary to use violence against racism. What are your thoughts on that?
That is such clownery. Um, Listen, the only times when you're allowed to use violence against racism is when someone is committing a hate crime against you, which means that they are actually inflicting violence upon you, because they are racist, you know? But, like, but that goes for any violent crime. If someone is hurting you, you have the right to defend yourself with violence, you know? But when someone says something racist to you, how on earth are you going to justify then just slapping them through the face? No, that's not how it works. That is not how it. We already have hate speech laws, which is bad enough already. So if you feel someone said something racist to you, then take it to the SAHRC. But I don't understand why that same SAHRC would now come out and say that actually sometimes violence is justified, especially when it's used against racism. That is, oh my god, I want to choke. That's just so bad.
It's
What is happening in our country?
it's really bad. And for example, I tagged them on social media and I said, look, the court order for the in what is it, injunction, or what is it? Oh, now I'm at a loss of words.
Interdict.
The interdict. Thank you very much. So the interdict was granted, but a day too late, right? So
Yeah.
that's obviously a major issue for me. Um, and on a previous, I think yesterday, I was on a White Noise podcast, and I said,
Mhm.
well, if I was clicks, I would take the EFF to court, and I would take the judiciary to court as well, if I'm able to, because of them and their lax manner in handling this issue. The stores had suffered property loss and revenue loss.
Yeah.
So if it was
Yeah.
possible, I would do that. But let's quickly talk about the OMA now, because as we've seen, well, no, before we get to that, the reason why I think the South African Human Rights Commission said that they're in support of this whole violence meets racism thing is because
Mhm.
they believe that words, and including symbolism, because remember, this is also the same institution that dragged the old flag into the Constitution Court and got it declared as a symbol of hate speech. But we will talk
Mhm.
more on that in a bit. So they believe that words are violence, which is so wrong because words are not violence. Even though they
It
may
is.
hurt
Yeah.
you, even though they might hurt your feelings, but they cannot be equatable or put on equal bar as physical violence.
I don't understand how educated people is trying to make that argument that racism, verbal racism, is on the same level as assault, rape, murder, any of these things. I really do not understand how we can justify that, how we can even pretend that that is true. Because it just isn't. Listen, if your feelings get hurt, I'm so sorry for you. I probably won't even help you, to be honest, because just get the fuck over it. What? Like, I feel something for you, okay? But listen, there's no need to take it to a court. Oh my god, who has the money for that? Who has the time for that? Just get over it. And like I said, that's why I don't like this right to human dignity bullshit. It shouldn't be in there because it is honestly unnecessary. It is unnecessary. But it's because back then people knew there would come a time of well, we already came from that time where black people and coloreds and Indians, their their human dignity has been impaired. Um, but people knew that, not people, the ANC knew that there would come a time where we would be able to to place the feelings of black people on the same level of harm being done to a person's body. And that is what is happening right now. And that is why the right to human dignity, the I don't think that the scope of that section will be narrowed down because it doesn't even have a scope to begin with. Um, which is a problem because now, like I said, your feelings are now going to be as important as your right to physical safety, and all of that is going to be included in the right to human dignity. Don't like that.
Not at all. And here's the interesting part, and this is what people need to understand, right? So, broad
Mm-hmm.
based black economic empowerment, affirmative action, and equal equity all rely on Section 9, which in turn is interpreted alongside Section 10.
Exactly.
This creates a massive problem for us in South Africa. Now let's get to the old lady. With that in mind, right? With that in mind,
Mm-hmm.
with you can have fair discrimination, an oxymoron that should never exist, the same as state capitalism or any other kind of bullshittery like that, and
Right.
expropriation should also not even be in the vocabulary. Um, so this old lady now, in self-defense, because if we look back at the footage, right, we can clearly
Mm-hmm.
see that this old lady was shoved or pushed. Let's say pushed,
Mm-hmm.
because pushed is not as forceful as being shoved, or is it the other way around? Either way, physical contact was made in an aggressive manner towards another individual from another individual. That is
Right.
a clear-cut case of physical assault, right?
Right.
And this is
Yeah.
something very important that people also need to know. You have the right to defend yourself within reasonable force.
Yes.
That's very important to know. She did pull the gun on him, yes, but she did not fire it,
Exactly.
right? And in the video, you can hear a woman, goading her, saying to her, shoot, 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 right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
fact that this woman, this old lady, did not pull the trigger, I take my hat off to her. Because it shows, no, it really does show you the amount of discipline this old lady had in that situation.
Yeah, for sure. Also, she's just smart as well. If she would have fired, she would have gone directly to prison.
Oh yes, definitely, because then a whole slew of cases would have been made against her from the SAPS. So, for example, the withdrawal of a gun in public, the firing of a gun in public, the firing of a gun without a warning shot, etc., etc. So there
Yeah.
are a lot of laws at play here. And ironically enough, I was backing up someone that said, well, it was reasonable for her to point the gun at the assailant. Someone said after I defended that position, they said, I don't know much of the law, do I? And I thought to myself, that doesn't even warrant a response because clearly you have never been in a situation where you had to use reasonable force to defend yourself.
But I don't even know why someone would say that to you because in terms of how I understand the law, which I did study this part of it last year, um that was completely reasonable. What would not have been reasonable is if she would have shot and killed someone. Even if she just I think even if she would have just shot someone, um because everything in that context is being considered. The fact that there was a guard between them, the fact that she was being led by several guards outside, and that even though she might have thought that there was a threat to her safety in that moment, but aiming the gun or showing the gun would have been enough to scare off these people. But if she had fired at any of them, that would have been very bad for her because, like you said, reasonable force, and that would not have been considered reasonable force. Reasonable force would have been if someone like straight out attacked her, like lunged at her and attacked her and was like physically brutally assaulting her. Then if she would have fired a shot, that would have been okay. That's what I think. Remember, that that's what the law says. But when things get into court, when things get into court, judges pull shit out of their ass.
Oh,
So
no, definitely.
especially, especially if if the accused is white.
Oh, yes, definitely. And this is the point that I was going to get to, right? Even if she just shot a warning shot into the air, because it would have been a discharge of a firearm in a public space, and that in
Yeah.
itself is an offense. Um, considering the circumstances, like you said. And also now remember that, judges, like you pointed out, do like to interpret Section 9 with Section 10. So they might
Hmm.
see this as a way of threatening the dignity of that EFF member that physically assaulted her, and they would deem it fair discrimination to punish her. It might not be a severe punishment. She might be lucky, she might get away with community service or a fine, but it's still a punishment nonetheless.
That
And
is exactly what would happen. Yeah.
yes, so
And
in order to keep the EFF happy and silent,
yeah,
and in order to keep the broader public happy and silent, so they will compromise on this. I'm fairly sure on that. If they do not, I will revisit this and I will retract what I say today. But I'm fairly sure that she will face a punishment of some sort.
I actually have that feeling, to be honest. I really do hope not, because I don't think that she broke any law. Um, unless of course her firearm was not licensed, which I doubt. I doubt that her firearm wasn't licensed. People wouldn't be dumb enough to then carry their firearm on them when they go to, the fucking store. Um, but I really hope not, because like I said, in a case like this, as you said, um Section 10 would definitely play a role there. And if that had to go along with Section 9, or even, let's say the court decided that they weren't going to include Section 9 into this, I don't even see how they could. But they do wonderful things in a courtroom. Um, they would still consider the fact that she is white and her attacker is black. Um, and they would still, try to come up with a judgment based on that, because for some reason we still have a major obsession with skin color in this country, especially in our courts, where we are not supposed to see this obsession is also very blatant and obvious in our courts, and with the ways that judges make rulings.
No, definitely, and I want to get to that. For example, in in the Constitution, in Chapter 1, the founding provisions, Section 1A, um, and B, for example, makes room for a fair case within the court, because it says here, the Republic of South Africa is one sovereign democratic state founded on the following values: A. Human dignity, the achievement of equality, and the advancement of human rights and freedoms, and B. Non-racialism and non-sexism. So, in all
Mhm.
respect, the court should, take that into account, as well as with point two, with the Constitution, where it says the Constitution is supreme. But you and I both know it's not, because in some section, I think it was 36 that you pointed out last time, that the Constitution isn't really supreme, because judges can make laws, or Parliament can make
Yeah.
laws and rulings that restrict the Constitution.
Yes.
Um, but yes, so in all honesty, that woman should be um, capable, or should be allowed, to have a free and fair trial. Well, not a free trial, but a fair trial, free from sexism and free from racism. Let's put it like that. Let's save my ass like that. Yeah.
But that's it's so sad that we have non-racialism as a concept in the very first section of our constitution, and yet um literally, like, just 9 sections later, we are told that nope, actually racism is needed to achieve non-racialism.
It's absolutely maddening. And this brings us back to, like, for example, broad-based black economic empowerment and affirmative action and equal equity. Um, like, I think it was with you that I stated this. You can't decry the system of the past, which was a racially based system, right? Which discriminated against people of color, on the basis of their race, right? And then
Hmm.
go and defend a system that discriminates people on the basis of their race, of the
Exactly.
present, whether it's broad-based black economic empowerment or apartheid. Both are predicated on the same idea, that race plays a cardinal role within the society of South Africa. And that is a problem. We need to start moving away from that.
It just seems though like every day we get more stuck in in that mindset. That's why, like, I do love Jimmy, even though him and I disagree all the time. And one of the things I can't handle about him is his insistence that we need um racial social justice um in order to achieve in order to achieve non 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 racialism. Sorry, my disorder is getting the better of me. Um, the and like the reason why that bothers me is, as you just said, that is exactly what apartheid did. But now you're saying no, but like now it's racism, but like with a good cause. It, bro, it's still the same thing. You're literally doing the same thing
No.
then. Who cares what the cause is? Who cares what you're trying to achieve? You are doing the exact same thing as the apartheid government. So, do you think you're going to get into heaven? Because I don't fucking think so.
Wow, that's a bit. Okay. So, but yeah, it's really interesting for me because they think like, oh, we're going to move from a racist society to a non-racial society or non-racist society through racism. It's like, how do you get to that? How do you connect those dots? Because I'm struggling to connect those very same dots. But I'm not going to talk too much about Jimmy as well because he is, in all honesty, I think he is a good person.
Yeah, it is.
Um, I haven't had much contact with him, and the one or two times that we did have contact, we butted heads really, really hard. Because what I
Of course.
find, yeah, because what I find, like most of them, that defend this position, they try and twist your words. And we can see this again with, for example, a friend of mine on social media that started to confront him as well. He pointed out that the water crisis within this township was not because of racism and doesn't cause racism, and so on. And Jimmy just turned around and said, well, if there was economic power, and here's the key point: economic power, equal economic power. If black people had more economic power, then they would not be exposed to racism.
Yeah. How does that work?
Yeah, I'm also struggling to try and figure that out because you've got political power, you've got policies and legislation and regulations that outrightly favor discrimination on the basis of not only the color of the skin of the person, but also depending on whether or not that person in the past was either disadvantaged or perceived as advantaged within the court
Exactly.
system. So
Exactly.
how do they not have economic power? That's the first question I ask. Perhaps, perhaps people should rely less on government
Absolutely.
and more upon themselves.
And the other thing is, what I would argue is that right now, the people who are facing the most racism in this country are white people, right? Because um, right now, I can pretty much say anything racist towards white people and nothing would be done to me. Nothing at all. Um, and we have racist economic policies in place, right? So even even as people would say, whites have the most power in terms of the the e- the
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 economy.
economy. Yes, goodness lord. Um, they still experience racism. So how does that argument work? Of if black people had more power, then they'd be less exposed to racism. No, that is not true.
Well, it brings me back to something that I've pointed out. I think it was with Joe Emilio on his podcast or on his talk show, where I said that it's because of this wacky idea of racism that they have. They believe that racism is power plus prejudice, and power here is divided into two groups, right? You can have political power and be prejudiced, but that does not mean that you are necessarily racist, right? Because in order to be racist, you have to have complete power. This would include the economic section. So in
Hmm.
Jimmy's mind, the laws aren't racist because it doesn't tick the economic box in his point of view, right? He doesn't take
Yeah.
it like you and I that think that racism is the bigotry and the prejudiced idea of people being better than others just on the basis of their skin, or excluding people from economic participation or from any sort of social participation on the basis of the color of their skin.
Yeah, and I think that's why you and and other people like us have remained sane for so long. It's because we have not allowed this new definition of racism to rot our brains, because it is absolute bullshit. We know what racism means, and it has meant the same thing for decades. Okay, during the time of apartheid, we had a simple definition of racism, and it worked out perfectly. We could use that definition and accuse our then government of racism, and it worked out perfectly. And other people in the rest of the world saw that what our government was doing to us was racism, and it worked out perfectly. But now we have to change definitions to, prove that this racism we speak of is still alive and well. It just takes a different form, and that's why we also have like these many different words now, like microaggression and what else is there? um Good lord,
Cultural
what's the other one?
appropriation and
That's yes, and what's the one? Is it unconscious
oh
bias?
yes, unconscious bias. I saw Tuli
Yeah,
Modensela, for example, make a case of
yes,
unconscious bias against this
yeah.
Clicks advert. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about that because on a level I do agree, but not because how can I say it? But not because it's so technical, but because I can see it even within myself, right? And to a degree, everyone is intrinsically unconsciously biased towards their own group. It's just the way that it is. It's natural, right? The steps
Hmm.
come in when you realize that and you actively start to work against that, to say to yourself, well, it might not be as good to always favor my group because economically speaking, it might not be the best route to go. It might be better to give a person from another group that fair chance. And we are back at fairness, right?
Right.
So, for those that are struggling with the definition of racism, that don't know what the definition is, there are two, but they both tie in very well together with one another. So, definition one, racism is a noun. It is the prejudice that members of one race are intrinsically superior to members of another race, or it is the discriminatory or abusive behavior towards members of another race. That's it. There's no
Hmm.
power equals, there's no racism equals power plus prejudice or any kind of bullshit like that. Those are the two things that we look at when we look at racism.
It's very simple, right? And that's why it's so easy for us to identify racism. We don't have to, think of all of these new terms to make racism where there really is none. Um, and some people don't even need these new terms, right? All they need is a misunderstanding between two people, and one of those people needs to be white. Then it's racism. It doesn't even matter what happened. It doesn't matter what was said. As long as there's a white person involved, yeah, had to be racist.
Definitely. And then that sort of uh, then that definition applies, right? For them. But they skew it so bad, so bad. Sometimes I wonder, like, how do you perceive this? Because I do not see the racism. We have many examples of this. Do you remember the Spur incident where that guy and that woman, had a tiff over I don't know what?
No, I don't remember, but that sounds familiar though. I think I vaguely recall something like that.
Yeah, so a guy and or a man and a woman. Obviously, the man was white and the woman was black. They had a little bit of a tiff, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you know, all of a sudden, instead of making it as grown-ups having a tantrum, because that's what I saw, two freaking grown-ups just having a fucking tantrum, people made that into a racial matter, and it wasn't. The guy didn't say anything racially discriminatory against her, just as the woman didn't say anything racially discriminatory against the man, at least from what I can remember,
Yeah.
right? Now, sexism might have been there, yes, but I mean, when people are angry, they say things that normally they normally wouldn't do in their normal senses, right? Because they're
Hmm.
trying to both physically or emotionally harm the other person or hurt the other person, because that's what people do. That's what animals tend to do. And yes, we are animals. Yes, you all heard me. I wonder how many people are going to say I'm a shill, but
Triggered.
yes, definitely. But yeah, um, on that note, are there any final thoughts that you want to share to the people?
Um, what I would really like is just for people to understand that this this document, the Bill of Rights, it really is not the word of God. You don't have to like you can recognize that it has flaws. That is completely okay. And there are a lot of flaws, like so many. Um and it's time that we at least try to see them and not wish them away, because they are not going away, because it seems like what our government is more intent on doing is changing the sections that are actually perfect, um, as opposed to changing the sections which really do not make sense and do not belong in a country like ours, which is trying to move forward, and trying to get away from the past, but not in the way of social justice, um, more in the way that does not involve racism or sexism or any of those things. Um, so yeah, that's just really what I want people to to remember, is that it's okay to say bad things about our supreme law. I promise you it's okay, nothing will happen to you. um and yeah, that's about it.
Well, thank you very much. On that bombshell, ladies and gentlemen, I want to wish you a good evening, and I hope to see you again on the next one. Thank you, Dee, for being on my show, and I hope to have you on for a second part of this constitution. I'll definitely try and hide the first one because that was wow. But this one I feel was much better, and I think people will grasp it a lot easier because we weren't
Yeah.
jumping around that much. Guys, as always, if you found this interesting, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. I'll leave D Martin's social handle Twitter um, in the description. Go follow her on Twitter. She's a very, very bright young lady, very passionate about law, and very interesting to talk to, I have to say. Um, she's
Thank
not
you.
she doesn't just have a lovely voice, she also has a lovely mind.
No,
Thank you, Dee, again.
thank you, Georgie, that's so sweet.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.